What's up, everybody? Look, there's no sugarcoating it, no way around it. You picked a fantastic week to show up because this is our sex talk. That's right. Look, I know that you're mature enough to handle this conversation because here's what I know about you and me and pretty much everybody. First, this isn't the first time you've heard the word sex, and in fact, I'd guess that this isn't the first time you're having conversation about it, especially if you were here last week. Number two, sex is a thing that we tend to whisper about or talk about behind closed doors or in the dark or in DMs. It's rarely a thing that we talk about with the lights on, and yet because sex is a good and powerful thing, it deserves some undistracted, non-secretive attention. And number three, lastly, before we jump in, when it comes to things that are good and powerful like money, sex, your health, your future maybe, all kinds of good and powerful things, isn't it true that you want to approach them with a plan instead of waking up one day unsure of how you got there? So, that's what we're doing here in this conversation. Now, last time we talked about how sex is a good and powerful thing, so choosing to have sexual integrity actually matters. And this week, hold on to your phones, because we're talking about how when it comes to sex, technology is good and powerful. So, let's take a closer look at that. When it comes to sex and technology, there are so many different things that we could focus on in this talk, from sexual relationships over technology to sending or receiving sexual images. But for this talk, we're going to try to just primarily focus on one of the most sexualized aspects of technology, and that is, you guessed it, pornography. Now, first, we have to acknowledge something pretty important about technology. One, as a tool, technology is good, right? We can power our homes with the sun. We can build cars that not only get us from point A to point B, but also have navigation built into them, and some of them even that can drive themselves. Phones give us access to the world whenever we want and connect us with people long distance. Those are all some of the good things that technology as a tool can be used for. At the same time, technology can be really difficult to manage. And just in case you don't believe me, think about this. Have you ever purposely or accidentally used technology to procrastinate doing something that you need to do? You got totally wrapped up in something, and before you knew it, way too much time had passed. Would you say that your screen time each week is probably a little more than you wished it was? Or have you ever thought, let me try to go for an extended amount of time without using my phone, like people used to do in the 1900s, and you only lasted an hour? Or have you ever been overly confident in your ability to practice self-control online? For example, you said you wouldn't check your ex's page, but you did. You said you wouldn't do any shopping online, but instead, you did. You said you wouldn't look at porn or sexual content, but maybe you did. Maybe you got caught up in sending or receiving nudes, or maybe porn has just become a habit. When it comes to technology, it can get complicated really quickly. And there's so much potential for good and much potential for bad. And sometimes, some of us, not all of us, think we can handle more than we actually can. And that brings us to the next part of our sex talk in this series. Now, the authors who wrote the Bible didn't have the technology that we have today, but they did have something to say about the topics that we're covering or the challenges that those things create. In fact, one of the best things about the Bible is that its authors remind us that people who lived thousands of years ago aren't all that different from people living today. We face the same kinds of issues and challenges that they did, so we read the Bible for inspiration, but we also read it to feel less alone. We read the Bible because we aren't the first people to experience the challenges that we face. And looking back on how they handled it can help us to know how we should handle it moving forward. So one of the guys that we tend to talk about quite frequently in church is the Apostle Paul. Now, he was one of the central figures in getting the church started. We talk about him a lot because he was responsible for writing a significant portion of part of the Bible, our New Testament. And one of the letters that he wrote was to a church in a town called Corinth. Now, Corinth was a thriving city. It was a hub for a lot of business. It was a wealthy town that was visited by a lot of people. And in some ways, it was kind of a party town. Like, think of New York or LA. It was also a very sexual culture, kind of like our culture today. And in the midst of that, the Apostle Paul said this: flee from sexual immorality. Now, you know that flee basically means to run away or run with fervor at an extreme rate. He says to run from sexual immorality. So, what is that? Sexual immorality is acting in a way that doesn't line up with what God says is best when it comes to sex. There's an inconsistency there. On the other hand, integrity is when your actions match your beliefs. And so that's why in this series we're using the phrase sexual integrity, which means basically to respect yourself and others when it comes to intimacy. It means you believe in respecting yourself and others, and you do your part to make sure that belief lines up with action. It may look like setting boundaries or making intentional choices to guard against situations that you don't want to be in. This idea can change the way that we think about porn. Now, sexual content is all around us: Snapchat, sexting, movies, music, advertisements, conversations, apps, the list could go on and on. But basically, it's everywhere. And porn alone is a $12 billion a year industry. Of course, it's all around us all of the time. In fact, much of those dollars from that industry are spent marketing to your demographic and even younger in order to get you hooked and make you lifelong customers. So you don't need me to tell you that it's everywhere. We all see it. And here's what you and I know: it's impossible to spend time around something and not be affected by it. This is a topic that is relevant to all of us. Porn culture has even affected those who don't look at porn at all because it has influenced the thinking of such a large portion of our culture. Paul continues, all other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You are bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. Now, in this passage, Paul talks a lot about the potential negative impact of sexual immorality, but that's because he placed such a high value on the way our bodies are connected to sex. Our bodies are what we use to experience the sexual intimacy that God designed. Sex can affect our lives in so many different areas, in our futures, in our mental health, our quality of relationships. So God must have designed it intentionally. And to be clear, desiring another person in a sexual way is common. We are sexual beings, and it's natural to have sexual desire, to be curious about sex, and to be attracted to other people. And that's why when it comes to sex and technology, it's important to know a few things. One, technology is a poor substitute for real sexual connection. Whether it's watching highly sexual movies, talking with other people online in a highly sexualized way, or seeking sexual experiences over technology, when we shift what's meant to be an in-person physical connection to the internet, it loses its meaning. It becomes selfish. It changes our motive from connection to pleasure. Porn never paints the full picture or tells the whole story of what we are meant to experience. There's always something missing, meaning we can have a tendency to make it just about physical pleasure and not about true connection. Sex is so much more than just what happens at the climax of a sexual encounter. It's more than just a release. And when we satisfy our sexual desires with a screen, what we're actually doing is training our brains to go back to that every time that you are aroused. And why does that matter? Because while God created your bodies, God created you as a body with a soul, with emotions, with a spirit, and sex was designed to include all of these things. And we believe that this is so much more and so much better than what porn has to offer us. I heard someone once say that sins can be basically boiled down to us trying to meet legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. And this topic is a perfect case in point to that. When you've wired your brain to desire a screen over a spouse, it reduces sex to just a tool for your own satisfaction, and it inhibits your ability to be intimate with your husband or wife. In other words, you cripple yourself from being able to actually connect with your future spouse. And this is actually what happens all the time. It's why ED medication has never been so lucrative, and why it's gotten to the point where it's not uncommon for it to be prescribed for men in their 20s and 30s, whereas it used to only be something for men past their prime. The technology just isn't a substitute for real connection. Now, the good news is, if you've already wired your brain for screen sex, if you've already acquired what many refer to as porn brain, then you can actually rewire it. It doesn't mean that you're doomed. You can make changes today to live with sexual integrity. You probably can't do it alone, and we'll talk more on that in a couple weeks, but you can do it. So that's the first thing. Technology is not a substitute for real connection. And here's the second thing. Technology is a poor education tool for sex. When we turn to technology or porn to explore our sexual desire or curiosity, we're asking it to do something that it wasn't intended to do. We're looking to satisfy deep desires, curiosities, and questions. And in reality, when we satisfy our deepest desires and questions in life, we discover peace. Porn can't deliver on that. Porn promises peace, but only provides provocative parlor tricks. Here's what's true. The legitimate need we're actually searching for when we settle for porn is that we're looking to be fully known and safe in the realest way God designed. But porn is not capable of doing that. It's just not what it's designed to do. In today's world, when you have a question about your homework or a new artist or a new food trend that you've heard about, it's normal to turn to technology. It's easy and natural to just turn to our phones and get the answers we need. However, in the case of sex, the answer we find when we turn to porn isn't designed to give you an accurate story. Porn is not created to inform or educate. A lot of people start watching porn because they're curious. The problem is, porn was never designed to educate us about the whole picture of sex. Porn is a performance. It's staged. It's based on a false version of what real sex and intimacy are actually like. It sets unrealistic expectations, and the truth is that anything that is designed or engineered or manufactured to appear that perfect can be addicting. And we can find ourselves addicted to a sexual education coming from false information. Porn makes sex the goal of a relationship with someone, but in its design context, sex is the result of the emotional and spiritual connection with someone within the safety of a lifelong commitment, i.e., marriage. And that's a great segue to our last point here, which is number 3. Technology makes it easier to treat people worse. Sexuality and technology can be tricky because being on your iPhone or computer can sort of feel like you have a barrier between you and reality, like you have an invisible shield. It's the same way you see TikTok made me buy it. Social media and the internet is made for our consumption. So when we get into the territory of other human beings on the other side of the technology, it gets infinitely more complicated. That's why you see so many trolls on comments and posts. It's way easier to treat people like they aren't real people when you aren't face to face, and when you're talking with a username instead of a human. When you treat people like they aren't people with value, worth, emotions, history, futures, families, etc., that's called objectifying them. And to objectify means portraying a human as an object meant just for your benefit instead of a person to be known, loved, or cared for. And any content that objectifies people for sexual pleasure falls into the category of sexual immorality. Sexual content that causes you to compromise your personal values or that make sex into just something that you can consume also falls into this category of sexual immorality. All right, this isn't a knock against sexual desires or technology. This is about what's best for you, your future, and what's honorable for your body. Now, think of it this way. Technology is good, and technology is powerful. When we turn to technology to satisfy our sexual desires, it leads us away from sexual integrity. Porn is powerful enough to take us to a place where we're not intended to go. Porn is powerful enough to try to satisfy something that it was never meant to satisfy. Technology is powerful enough to get out of control and highly addictive when we're not intentional with it. So what does sexual integrity look like in the area of technology? Well, let's start by doing what Paul asks us to do. Flee from. Flee from it. Not walk, not avoid, not ignore, but actively run away. This means that we proactively take steps that put us in a place to utilize what's great about technology without compromising our sexual integrity. What would it look like for you to run away from sexual immorality? All right, I'll give you some practical examples to get your gears turning. Can I let you in on a little bit of a secret that I've never actually confessed publicly for reasons that I'll share with you here in a second? I like Post Malone a lot. I love his voice. I like a lot of his music. And also, there's a lot of his music I don't listen to, right? Technology is great. You can create playlists that only include what you want them to have in there. Hollywood's Bleeding. I love that song, right? It's great. But one of his most famous songs, Rockstar, that's not on my playlist. I don't listen to that one. I've listened to it in the past. I've heard it. And part of why I listen to some of this stuff when I listen to new music is one, I want to know what you guys are listening to. I want to know what is popular when like 50 million people a month listen to him. So I'll listen to all of it, but then I weed out what I want to regularly listen to versus what I just enjoy to have on. And so I'm very particular about the type of music I listen to. I'm not going to listen to stuff with sexually explicit lyrics that talk about things that I just don't need to be thinking about, right? How I treat social media is also very different from the way the vast majority of people treat social media. I have boundaries set up with that. Really, honestly, I would probably be better at connecting with people and with our church Instagram account and all that kind of stuff if I were on it more, but I'm not. I schedule a lot of posts. My assistant schedules a lot of posts. I have a student leadership team that they post on there, and so I'm not even the only one with the password. I'm just not on it very much, okay? I have a real connection with real people outside of social media, and I don't find social media to be a particularly helpful way for me to connect with people in my everyday life. Now, it's good for other things, which I'll talk about here in a minute, but I don't get on there and just scroll mindlessly. I don't get on there and just waste my time, because odds are I'm going to find something that's not appropriate. And to give you a little hint, if you look at your Explore page and it's filled with boobs and booties, it's probably because it knows what you're looking for. It knows where your eyes have been and what you spend your time on that platform looking at. And so it's going to be filled with things that you shouldn't be consuming. Things that are on social media casually now are things that would have been considered porn a generation before you. So I'm very particular with who I follow and what shows up on my feed, what I like, and all those kinds of things, because I want those algorithms trained on the things that I actually want to see and away from the things that I don't. Okay? What kinds of movies and shows that I entertain myself with differ drastically from other people, right? And what I'm telling you is not gospel. What I'm telling you is my opinion based on my experience. These are some of the boundaries that I have set up with me. So, movies, TV shows, I do not watch anything that has female nudity in it. It's just a hard line. Some people disagree. There's a lot of popular shows on right now I will not watch because I look them up. I see what's in them before I watch them. I should clarify, I read about what's in them before I go and watch them so that I am aware of what I'm getting myself into. The only exceptions in the past have been with shows or something that I know that I have somebody close to me that I trust that has said, hey, there's actually this at this point, so just skip over that. And we know when to skip, and I watch it with my wife. I don't watch it by myself, and she has the remote. So we have very particular guardrails set up to flee from things that could lead down the path towards sexual immorality. I just don't mess with that, right? Again, this is a personal thing that I do to protect myself, to guard myself, to put up guardrails, and to flee sexual immorality with the things that I entertain myself with. Now, everybody is different. Everybody struggles with things in a different way to a different degree. But my hot take is that if you're someone who has struggled with porn, especially in recent memory, that's probably a hard line you should not cross. Do not entertain yourself with the things that a generation ago would have been considered hardcore pornography. There are plenty of great things to entertain yourself with that don't have to include any of those things. So now that we've spent some significant time on that, let's talk about the next step, which is to run towards the good things. It's not good enough to just run away from something. There has to be something that you're running towards. When we run from using technology in unhealthy ways, what will we run towards? What part of sexual integrity do we need to be intentionally moving in the direction of? And whose help do you need in order to do just that? Right? You can talk about this in your small group or one-on-one with your small group leader afterwards, but you need to come up with something. Again, I'll give you some practical examples for my own life to think about, right? I love YouTube. I follow lots of great Christian channels that get me thinking in heavenly ways or in godly ways. And I told you how I don't use social media, but how I do use social media is to check in with people that I care about that don't live near me, that I can just see a life update on what's going on with them. I use it to watch funny reels, and sometimes I stay up too late doing that. But 80% of the time when I'm scrolling on reels, I'm sitting right next to my wife. And I've, again, trained that algorithm. If something comes up in my reels, which I don't like the format of it anyway, just because you never know what you're going to see. But whenever something comes up that seems inappropriate or something like that, I will scroll quickly right away. I don't hesitate, especially even when Chelsea's not around me, because when she is around me, I don't want her to see something that comes up on my screen that I've trained the algorithm to show me, right? So at all times, I just scroll past it, because even 3 seconds lingering on something I know I shouldn't will tell that algorithm to send more of that crap to me, and I don't need that. You notice this because you'll like a funny video, and then suddenly you'll watch a funny reel, and suddenly you'll see all kinds of content just like that for the next week, right? So we all know that this is true about the algorithms and about social media. So when I watch funny things, I do enjoy it, but I'm very careful when I'm on those platforms. Oftentimes I will post and ghost because I don't find that that's a meaningful place to have real connections with people. I see more arguments and debates and trolls and stuff that just is crap. It doesn't matter. It's not real connections with people most of the time. And so I leave those for offline. Right? One of the things you'll notice, healthy couples don't feel the need to post selfies every time they're on a date. Right? Healthy couples will be having a great relationship without feeling the need to share it with the rest of the world. Another good way I use technology is I use the plans feature in the Bible app to give me something to read on my own and to do with other people. That's a really good way to have community with people in the YouVersion Bible app, is doing those plans with people, because you get to have discussion with them. You get to follow up in person, even if you're around those people on a regular basis, where you get to talk about the things that you just went through in the plan. You read some Bible, you had a devotion, and you did it with somebody that you could discuss. Chelsea and I have done that together. I've done that in various groups over the years, and it's a really helpful tool. So technology is a good and powerful tool that can be used to our advantage if we use it wisely. Maybe it's time for us to consider if there are more powerful ways to use technology than maybe we thought was possible. Imagine being a person of sexual integrity in this area. Wouldn't that be better, more peaceful, more helpful, more hopeful? This is the life that God has for you. You can see God working when you choose sexual integrity and experience God helping you live that out. God loves you and wants nothing but what's best for you in your life, and especially when it comes to something this important. So I'm going to leave it to you and your small groups to continue having this conversation. Again, we'll be back next week to continue even more. I hope this is helpful and beneficial to you. Have a good group discussion. We'll talk more next week.